So I imported all of the shape keys from Make Human into Humanizer, my character creator in Godot, and there's about 1,200 of them, so it made the skeleton and clothing builder much slower, and I realized that I needed to optimize this by pre-calculating the shape keys instead of calculating them individually when it updates, and this will make it much faster. Although you don't really change the skeleton or the shape keys in-game that often, so it's not that big of a deal, but it took about half an hour just to generate the import mesh, so I figured it would be good to optimize now before I try to add all the shape keys. And I'll probably split this into 2 or 3 episodes, and then I'll upload it all to the repository when it's done, since each step will affect the next one. So when I re-import the shape keys onto the human mesh, it'll break the skeleton builder and the clothes builder. I am using the latest version of Godot, which is 4.2, and they released this a couple days ago, so when you try to open the project, it will try to convert it. And you can download the latest version from godotengine.org. You can get the executable or the source code for the latest version and for 3.5. So, and once this is done importing the assets, it will need to convert the meshes as well, so it'll pop up. So it says it uses meshes with an outdated mesh format. So you can go to Project, Tools, and Upgrade Mesh Surfaces. So this will convert the meshes and restart the project. Now I want to make 2 separate meshes from Blender, one for the helper geometry and one with just the visible vertices. So I am using Blender 4.0 with the latest MPFB plugin. So I'll make a new human from scratch and disable all of the shape keys. So I just have the basis shape, and under modifiers I'll remove the hide helpers. So now we have the clothing and hair helper vertices visible, and I'll save this as helpers. And now in a new separate project, I'll make another new human from scratch and disable the shape keys again. But this time I'll leave the helpers hidden. So now I want to add a rig, use the Mixamo, and add standard rig. Then I'll go to File, Import, FBX, and get the Mixamo animation file that I had generated previously. And then under operations, animation, if you select both of the meshes, you can snap to Mixamo to animate the model. So I'll go ahead and export or just save this as human.blend in the project and let these re-import into Godot. Once it's done, I'll open up the helpers.blend, just double click on the file in the browser through the editor and select the node with the white square, enable save to file, and save it as helpers.resource and re-import. And I'll do the same thing for the human.blend. So this will override the existing human resource. Which will pretty much break everything, but I'll get it all fixed. So now if I make a new 3D scene for to load the Shapekey data, and add the helpers and human resource, so you can see that the one has the helper geometry and the other doesn't. And I'll go ahead and save this in the generate mesh. So now in ready, if I print the helpers mesh surface get arrays on surface 0 at the mesh vertex array dot size, and I print the human vertex array size, you can see down here that the helper geometry has about 30,000 and the base human mesh only has about 17,000. So you can see this will be significantly faster. It's almost half of the vertices are just helper geometry. So I can reference the positions from the helper geometry to then build the skeleton and clothing assets. I can pre-calculate using these values and then save it on this model. And this still has all of the bone weight and rigging information from the skeleton. So if you drag the entire blend file and make local, it has the skeleton and the animation player, so that will still work. Now I can get rid of the human mesh since that was just for demonstration, and reset the transform for the helper mesh, and I'll make a new onReady variable for the helper vertex array using the surface get arrays, and it has to be onReady so that the mesh will be loaded, otherwise it will return null. Then I'll make the blender to go.index from utils create unique index on the helper vertex array. So this just gets the unique values from the input array and uses those as the index on a new dictionary and maps the corresponding index from the array. And depending on the flag, it will return the dictionary or an array. So this works because when you import from Blender, it keeps the vertex array. It just adds additional ones in because of the GLTF format, I believe. So when you index it like this, you can convert from the Blender indexes, which are referenced in the Shapekey files, to the Godot.index, so you can actually move the correct points. So now I'll make a new variable for the Shapekey data, set it to an empty dictionary, and I'll make a new function to make the basis. And I'll set the Shapekey data at basis equal to an empty array. Then I'll loop over the Blender index in the Blender to go.index.size and get the go.index equal to B to G index at the Blender index at 0. So this will just get the first point that corresponds, although there may be several. They'll all be at the same position, so I'll just get the first one, and then I'll get the coordinates from the helper vertex array at the go.index, and then I'll append the coordinates to the Shapekey data dot basis array. Now I want to save the Shapekey data in a JSON file. So I already have the save JSON function. This just opens a file with write access and uses json.stringify to store the line in the file. So I'll add this to the utils and make the function static so it can be called without making a new utils object. Then after I make the basis in the ready function, I'll save the Shapekey data to the generate mesh Shapekey data.json and pass the Shapekey data dictionary. So now if I run the scene, you can see that it has made the Shapekey data.json, and this has the basis element with an array of vertex positions. Now I want to loop over the Shapekey target files, which I have in the Shapekey data folder. These contain the index and relative coordinates for each Shapekey. So in the Godot documentation, they have a function to loop over the contents of a directory in the dir access class. So I'll just use that, rename it to get target files, and call this in the ready function, and I'll pass the Shapekey data folder. So now if I run this, it will print all of the shapekey.target file names. Now it didn't find any directories because I only have files here, but in the config data targets from Blender, you can see that it has a nested file structure, and we have several levels of zip files, and each of these contains just a single target file. So I'll want to keep this structure probably. So when it finds a directory, I'll just want it to call get target files from the path plus the new file name. And I think I'll need a slash in here too, and then get rid of the slash at the end of the folder name. Then if it finds a file, I do want to check the extension. As you can see, there's a .json here, and there's some PNG files as well. So I only want it to process the file if the extension is .target. Then I'll want to process the Shapekey from the path plus file name, and I'll make a new function to process the Shapekey, which will take a path and I'll just print the path for now. Just to make sure that still works. And another thing to consider is, while the macro Shapekeys pretty much affect every single vertex, so they'll need to be considered for all of the clothing and skeleton, a lot of the Shapekeys only affect a subset of the vertices. So, for example, the earlobe. So the left earlobe only has about 40 vertices in the file. So I'll go ahead and copy a couple of these over as well, because I don't necessarily want to generate the entire Shapekey entry if it's just the nose that is changing. I don't need to change the skeleton structure. And so by ignoring those, I can reduce the number of calculations. So I'll just copy these over as well, so I can make sure everything works. Next, I want to get the Shapekey name. So I need to remove the extension from the file name, and you can use the string get file and string get base name to strip off the extension from the file name. So I'll get the Shapekey name equals path dot get file dot get base name, and I'll print the shape name. So you can see I just have the name without the file path and extension. Then to read the Shapekey data, I'll open up the import shapekeys. So I need to get the target file using file access and loop over the lines in the file until the position reaches the end of the file, and use the path. So, and if I print the line, you can see it's now printing the data from the Shapekey files. So it's loaded the files. Then I want to parse the string at the spaces into floats. So I'll use the split floats function and get the Shapekey index from the first element, then create a vector 3 from the last 3, and multiply by the scalar of 0.01. And now I want the Shapekey data to be normalized, and these coordinates are relative, so I'll add plus equals the Shapekey basis at the Shapekey index. And I'll go ahead and print that out. So now it's generating a bunch of vector 3s. Now I want to add the coordinates to the Shapekey data. So first I'll set Shapekey data dot Shapekey is equal to a new dictionary because I want to index them by the Shapekey name, because I need to add the names to the file. Then in process Shapekey, I'll set the Shapekey data dot Shapekey is at the shape name equal to a new dictionary, because I want to preserve the index from the file. So instead of using 1, 2, 3 for the index, I want to keep the 119, 122. So you have to use a dictionary to preserve the index. And now, instead of printing the coordinates, I'll set the at shape name at Shapekey index equals the Shapekey coordinates. And this will not make a line, or this will not make an entry in the array for the vertices that don't exist in the file. So this will just be 50 elements for the nose curve rather than 16,000. And now I'll run the project again. It does take longer since we're calculating all of that. And if I try to open the Shapekey data, it's actually too big now, but I'm assuming that it put everything where it should be. Now I want to build the shape keys from the Shapekey data instead of from the target files. So first I need to add the helper mesh to the scene. And the human mesh is already there. You can see that previously I was generating the export mesh with all of the helper geometries included. So I want to generate the shape keys, but just with the human model vertices instead. And there's no shape keys on either of the import meshes. Now I need to map the Blender index to the human mesh index. So I'll need to get the unique values from the helper and then compare the coordinates to the human mesh to get the corresponding index. So first I'll get the human vertex array equals the mesh arrays at array vertex from the import mesh, and I'll just change the name for consistency. And I'll also get the helper arrays and helper vertex. Now I need to index the human shape, the human vertex to the Blender index. So I'll need to get the unique values from the helper and compare the coordinates to the human mesh. So first I'll get the onReady, I'll get the human vertex equal mesh arrays at vertex. And I want to get the helper arrays and helper vertex as well. And I've already done this calculation in the index vertices. So this was to get the Blender to Godot index for the skeleton, to pre-calculate it between the shaded and unshaded. So now I'll replace the index vertices, and instead of import I'll use the helper and instead of shaded, I'll use the base human vertex array. Now I'll just run this. I want to comment out the rest of the file so it doesn't throw any errors, so I assume that worked. And now I need to process the shape keys. So first I'll get the shape key data equal to utils read JSON, and I'll give it the shape key data JSON. And this gets the file as a string and then uses JSON parse string to get the dictionary. So, and now from the shape key data, I'll loop over the shape names in shape key data dot shape keys. And then I'll call process shape key from the shape name. And I'll make a new function to process the shape key, take the shape name as a string. And first I'll want to add the blend shape to the new mesh, and I'll just print the shape name to make sure that's working. So you can see that it has found all of the shape keys. Now I'll set shape data equal to the shape key data at shape keys at the shape name, and I'll loop over the, I need to make a new shape array and resize it to array max. Then I'll set the vertex array equal to the human vertex array dot duplicate, and I'll append that to blend arrays. Now I want to loop over the shape data, so I'll get the blender index in shape data, and I'll set the Godot index equal to the blender to Godot at the blender index, and I'll print the Godot index. So this throws an error because the blender index is a string, but the array needs an integer. So I'll cast the, because it was read from a JSON file, so it's just a string automatically. And now you can see that it's printing out the arrays of Godot indexes that correspond to the blender index. Then I need to get the coordinates from the shape data at the blender index, and I'll print that. So now for I in Go.index, I'll set the new shape at array vertex at I equal to the coordinates. And if I run that, it'll throw an error because the JSON file can't process the vector 3s, so it stores it as a string. So I'll need to change the Shapekey loader to save this as an array, so I'll do that. First, in utils, I'll make a new function to convert from a vector 3 to an array, which will take a vector variable, and I'll make a new array value equals an empty array, and then I'll append vector at x, y, and z. And return the array. Then I'll make a second function to convert back from array to vector 3. This will take an array variable, and I'll make a new vector equals vector 3, and I'll pass array at 0, array at 1, and array at 2 into the constructor and return the new vector. And now when I load the Shapekey data, I'll set the shape keys at the index equal to utils dot vector to array of the Shapekey chords. And then I'm referring to the basis, so if I convert it up here, then it'll say you can't add a vector to an array. So instead, at the end, before I save and after the target files, I'll loop over the Shapekey basis and set the Shapekey basis equal to utils vector to array, set the Shapekey data basis at I equal to vector to array, Shapekey data basis at I, and I'll run that again to regenerate the Shapekey data JSON file. Now I can open up the import Shapekeys scene again, and in the process Shapekey, I'll set the new shape array vertex at I equal to the utils array to vertex to vector to convert it back of the coordinates, and I'll run the make mesh function, and I can get rid of the process shape keys and get target files functions. So this has consolidated it quite a bit, and I'll rerun the import shape keys. So now you can see in the export mesh it does not have the helper geometry, but we have all of the shape keys, including the two that I added, although that'll be kind of hard to see. There's the nose. So that all seems to be working. Lastly, I can open up the generate shading, and since this is just based on the import mesh, I can just run it. It doesn't read the Shapekey files at all, or need the Blender index. So, as you can see, now the shaded human does not have the helper geometries, and once again we have all of the blend shapes here, including the earlobe and nose. So that's as much as I'm going to do in this episode. You can see if I open up the skeleton builder, it no longer works and throws a bunch of errors because I've changed the shaded human mesh. So I'll fix that and the clothing in a future video, but that's all for now. So thank you so much for watching and have a great day.